Hello, today we are visiting one of the most famous, admired, loved and popular buildings that was built in the Czech Republic in the 20th century, and we will try to introduce it to you in a bit more detail. We are on the Ještěd mountain in northern Bohemia, and we have come today to show you this absolutely extraordinary architectural, technical and engineering masterpiece. You can see for yourselves what the conditions are like here, and this is still beautiful weather. A lot of times the weather changes in seconds. So when you come to visit, you're like, wow, this might be pretty dangerous here. Now imagine that someone had to build this place for 7 years in these conditions. There used to be a historic lodge on this spot, a German lodge with a hotel, with a lookout tower. That was a very popular place that everybody knew and had as their destination. But the year we think it burned down. The very next day, engineers and architects from nearby Liberec went up to see if it was possible to reconstruct this burned out structure, but concluded that it was not possible and that it would have to be replaced with a new building. That was the beginning of an architectural competition that anticipated that there would be 2 buildings here. There would be a hotel, but a separate television transmitter. 12 teams worked on it, and only one of them, the architect Karel Hubáček, with his collaborator Zdeněk Zachar, came up with a different idea. He said, no, I'm not going to build 2 houses there, I'm only going to do 1. The hill is beautiful, it's pointed, you can see the silhouette from everywhere, and there can't be 2 houses there. He said, I will extend the hill with the building, and what was next? 7 years of cruel work under in the harshest of conditions. When I started studying here in nearby Liberec in 1998, I discovered a chronicle that I think was written in the 70s, and it was quite critical of that construction. It made me laugh when I read that this house had replaced the old silhouette of the hill with the German hut, and that it was a big change that wasn't very good. It's been less than half a century, and I don't think anybody can imagine this hill without that building. And so that's an extraordinary feat, because in the 20th century, in the second half of the 20th century, there were a number of what I think are great buildings in this country, but I would say only this one is loved by both professional community and general public. So now let's see together what this most pointed hill in the world, as we sometimes call it, looks like. From the inside, you can hear for yourself how it is right now with the wind outside, and that's not unusual. So I think everyone is really looking forward to getting inside. When you go in, you basically have 2 choices. You can go to the hotel area, which we'll show you later, or you can go to the public area, especially the restaurant. And I think the first impression is great. Suddenly you enter a really futuristic space that looks a bit like a rocket. You've entered from the outside, from a glass terrace that's partially covered. You've gone through a wrought bronze door, and suddenly you're at this monumental staircase that leads you up past this beautiful piece of art that clearly shows that the combination between art and architecture is going to be quite important here. Structurally, It's a pretty simple affair. There are two concrete frames inside, two concrete cylinders. We're looking at the outer one, which is covered by this concrete relief, which is part of the artwork by the Libenský-Břicht duo, Meteorite Fall. But what's more important to me is that the other structure, the steel structure, has been rolled out of these cylinders. And when we look at it from the bottom, we see the aluminum profiles that are partially attached to it. And then there are individual artificial lights leading down from them, these little stars, these dots, hundreds of them, and they form a complete carpet of light. And I think it's beautiful that it's not one big thing, but a series of little fragile ones that complete this landscape. The whole building is, of course, circular in plan, and architects love circular floor plans. It's quite a challenging thing to get right, but when you do, it works really well. So you go up the stairs and suddenly you're in this space that's completely open to the outside, to views, to different directions, and to different light conditions. And that's the main quality here. Yes, you can sit here, you can have something to eat here, but you will always be in contact with the outside world. And no matter what the weather is like outside, it's always interesting. And I really like it when there's a lot of snow in the winter and you can see it outside those individual windows. So you know you're in quite difficult weather conditions and you can be at ease inside. The circle has another interesting advantage. You can really go all the way around it in a circle when the doors are open, and you can go from the restaurant to the cafe, to the lounge, to the bar, and back again. And then there's an inner circle, and that contains the technical facilities, mainly the kitchen and the toilet. And theoretically, you can go around that too, except that it has a smaller radius. So you've got two worlds side by side, the one open to the public and the one for the staff, and they're right next to each other. We go on from the restaurant to the small Avion bar, and here you can see one significant difference. Thanks to the association Ještěd 73, the original elements of the furnishings, including tables, chairs, bar seats, gradually started to appear here in collaboration with the original interior designer Otakar Binar, and the difference is huge, and I was very happy about it. It's small steps, incremental changes like this that show this could be possible, and suddenly the feel of the interior is great. So there's not much of that original interior furniture that survived, but the effort to gradually bring it back in is clearly evident. And a few years ago, the association put out a little architectural competition, and ARN Studio was successful. And it's clear that this is the goal for the future, to bring all of it back to the original design. Another of the rooms that has been brought back to its original form is this lounge for 12 people, dominated by a large table, 12 beautiful white leather chairs. But my favorite part is the chandelier, because the chandelier is made up of the usual lighting that you find in a restaurant, only it's arranged in a slightly different way, and it's condensed together, and it's a beautiful thing. There's a separate spiral staircase leading up to the hotel floor directly from the reception, and I'm always happy when I find myself here. It's lined with this really gorgeous ceramic tiling, and there's this false ceiling at the top. you can only make more out of individual white painted beams. I always think of a line by one of the authors, Gigi Suchomel here, who said, "Our strongest skill in those days was to make a feast out of potatoes and water." And that's exactly how it works here. If you look at it closely, you'll see that it's done with quite simple, primitive things, but the effect is quite powerful. Suddenly you enter this clean, white space that takes you where you need to go. When we climb the stairs to the first floor of the hotel, we find that the beautiful ceramic tiling continues on here. There's an impeccable stone floor, beautiful light fittings, and we're in this quite large space which doesn't get natural light. But you can get into the individual hotel rooms, which of course are already attached to the facade. From the original 3, we can still find 2 of these hanging chairs, which are intended either for people of shorter stature or especially for children, who I think enjoy this extremely much. And anyone who has ever lived on Jested, I think sat in this chair at least for a while. There are about 7 works of art on Ještěd to this day, which have been placed here since the time of their realization, and this is a lattice by Jaroslav Klapšte, which consists of these fragments of historical agricultural pieces. And I think it shows a certain relationship to the landscape and to this place. But it's not my cup of tea. I've always felt like these things don't belong here, but I understand that some people like them. There are now 2 floors in total on the Jested that are used as accommodation. One was designed as hotel accommodation and the other as a dormitory. So today you can stay in both. We are now in the 2nd floor, the smaller one, which is kind of more modest. The sanitary facilities, showers, toilets are in the corridor, but we are in the largest 2-bedroom apartment, and it has this sitting area in the middle, which is where I am at the moment. The standard room has the face of a circle, meaning you enter at the narrowest point and it gradually gets wider. On the sides you have the social facilities, a shower and a toilet. Then you go through this glass screen with nice handles and you enter the main room, and immediately everything pulls you towards the outer perimeter. But whatever room you find yourself in, of course you are always in contact with the outside environment, often with a fog like the one here today. But you can see the facade from the inside, and it has, of course, a whole range of original features, and I'm always delighted with them. I mean, you can look at the aluminium radiator covers, you can look at the original windows in aluminium profiles that look like something between a ship or an aeroplane. You can pull down the blinds like this, which are in these thin guide wires, and actually everything here has a kind of fragility, including hiding the lights behind these bent plastic covers, and actually these things help it tremendously. And then you just need one like this autocarbinar nightstand, which you can light up at night, and suddenly you're like, yes, I'm back in the 70s. This seems like a seeming detail, but I stayed here 3 years ago with my young son. He was 3 at the time. and he found this to be the best place for him because he just had the height to look out the window. I mean, the windows here have very low sills, and how it's still sloped like that. So if you're really small, you can get right up to it, which an adult basically can't. And he woke up at 5 in the morning and stood at the bottom of the window like this and watched the clouds roll in and the sun shine and the weather change. And he was absolutely thrilled about it, and he talked about it for 6 months and said, we've got to go again. So the best place for kids. When you find yourself here visiting a local restaurant or as a hotel guest, I think it's quite easy to forget that this building has another purpose, that it was designed not only as this kind of public amenity, but primarily as a transmitter, a television transmitter and a radio transmitter, and that it contains such a technical part. And of course, it has a slightly different design. It's much more utilitarian and Spartan, and when you see some of these things, you might think, oh, that's not so interesting. Unfortunately, we didn't get permission to film in the parts that are specifically for radio communications this time, but I did a sort of guided tour here for Radio Wave a couple of years ago, and we'll show you some of the footage because I think it's worth it. There's a 3-story elevated space up above the hotel, part of the hotel, which you'll see from the outside. It looks white. It's a little bit different in design, and that's because there's no iron, no sheet metal. It was an absolutely extraordinary feat of engineering to make it so that the whole structure is made of fiberglass, coiled fiberglass rods. Karel Hubáček was an avid fisherman, and I think he was able to convince that the same technology as for fishing rods could be used for the supporting structure, and therefore would not interfere with the signal. As I mentioned at the beginning, when the competition was announced, it was announced for 2 separate buildings, the hotel part of the restaurants and a separate transmitter, because everybody said, you can't combine them together. It's impossible. The signal has problems with the iron. And Karel Hubáček had this brilliant idea, no, it's a beautiful pointy hill. I'm only going to put 1 building there. I'm not going to do more than 1. I'm going to combine them together. But then it took a lot of unique engineering solutions to get those things to be inside 1 building. The Ještěd Mountain Hotel and Television Transmitter is a building that every Czech knows and knew even before we showed it to you today in this piece. I'm sure many of you have visited this building when you've stopped here to ski or have a bite to eat, but I have verified that relatively few people have stayed here overnight and slept here for 1 or more nights. If they haven't, please consider it. I think it's a unique opportunity to stay in a place like this for a little longer, and especially in the evening, to have it to yourself, so to speak, and to be able to walk around, look at some of the details, and really spend some time here. The building is so great, it deserves it. Yes, it will be 50 years old next year. The ravages of time have taken quite a toll on it, and I look forward to hopefully seeing a more substantial renovation in the next few years to help it structurally and technically, as well as bringing some of the spaces in line with the original design, which was excellent. We will keep our fingers crossed that it will turn out well.